What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Moose Game here, and today I'm here to give you an epic commander tier list in Rise of Kingdoms in 2025. Now, the reason why I'm doing this list is simple. For one, I have a very young account that is about 30 days old, and when I was raising that account, I just realized how important it is for you to know which epic commanders for you to actually invest in, because if you make wrong epic commander investments in the earlier part of the game, it could potentially hurt you in terms of how well you can progress within the game. So that's the reason why I'm making it. It's mainly for the younger players, but then again, if you're an older player but you're thinking about making a new farm, or if you're thinking about making a very young account that you want to just try playing free to play, this tier list might be the right tier list for you. Now, the way that the tier list is actually divided is simple. There's only one commander that will be actually in the very top tier, which is going to be SS tier, and I called it the one and only god. And as per its description, there's going to be only one commander that will be able to actually make it in this SS tier. And then there will be S tier, which is actually one of those commanders that are almost as good as 5111 meta KvK1 commander or better. So if there are commanders that are, let's say, for example, let's say if you have 5111 Tutmos, it is arguable that commanders that are in S tier might be able to perform better than your 5111 Tutmos, 5111 Charles Martel, whatever it is that is kind of like a meta level legendary commander that you can actually think about at the end of the day. So that's where the line is drawn for S tier commanders. And then I have PvE only. The reason why PvE only is between S tier and A tier is simple, because after S tier, you probably should actually just consider investing in PvE only commanders more, just because of the fact that, beyond S tier, A tiers are kind of that by the time you can actually invest in all your S tier epic commanders and you start working on your A tier, you might already be out of like the stage of the game where you really don't need epic commanders anymore. So that's where the standard of A tier is, right? They're good enough, but then again, by the time that you work on them, you might actually not need to invest in them and so forth. So that's what the standard of A tier is. B tier means that it's just unless you have really a lot of epic commander sculptures, it is generally not recommended for you to just go ahead and work on those commanders. But then again, in terms of if you read their descriptions, they're good, but they're not just worth it. It's basically what B tier is. And then C tier means that they're garbage. Simple, right? All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to start off from S tier and then move one of the S tier up to the SS tier after I put in all the S tier commanders in their place. And let's just start off from Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is a great example of what an S tier commander is. And let's just go ahead and jump into the game and talk about Sun Tzu. So the reason why Sun Tzu is so good is because when you actually expertise, which means that you actually have unlocked and leveled up all of the commander's skills, you can have a choice to actually expertise this commander. And when you expertise Sun Tzu, his expertise actually empowers the first skill that he has, which is the Art of War. And when the Art of War is actually enhanced, it will deal 800 damage factor in a cone to 5 different troops in a fan. So that is 800 damage factor to 5 different units in a fan. And after 1 second, the troops hit by this skill will take additional 200 damage factor. And on top of that, for every enemy hit by this skill, this commander's troop gains 50 rage. Now, let's break this skill down. First of all, it deals direct damage up to 5 enemy troops in a fan. So that may not sound like a lot, but actually in Rise of Kingdoms, when you do area of effect damage where you hit more than one target, in an active skill, or even if it's not an active skill, whenever you deal damage to more than one target, and we call that area of effect damage. That's where it says AoE, right? When you deal that kind of damage, each target that you hit beyond the first is usually going to take less damage. For example, let's just look at Zhuge which is a great example of AoE target units, right? AoE target commander. It deals direct damage to up to 5 nearby enemy troops, damage factor 2000. So he does 2000 damage factor AoE. Every additional target reduces the damage to each target by 15%. So how this works is that if you're hitting only one target, you're going to do 2000 damage factor, right? But then again, if you hit 2 different targets, the damage of each target is going to get reduced down to 1700, 1700. So in total, you're going to deal 3400 damage, right? And then if you hit 3 targets, that damage is going to be reduced even further. So it's going to do 1400 damage factor to 3 different targets. So in total, it will deal 4200 damage factor. So that's how most area of effect damages work in Rise of Kingdoms. But let's just go ahead and jump right back to what Sun Tzu's skill says. It doesn't mention anything about damage reduced per each additional target added, does it? So in theory, this Art of War skill, if it hits 5 different targets, it could deal 4000 damage factor damage. But the reason why Sun Tzu is S tier is not just that. Because this extra skill damage factor of 200 after 1 second should be added to the total damage that it does to the 5 enemy targets, right? So in reality, this commander's active skill, although he's an epic commander, let's just not forget that. Although he's an epic commander, he can do 5000 damage factor to if you hit 5 different units, right? So that's why Sun Tzu is very, very strong commander. Now, Sun Tzu's skill, the active skill actually does not stop there. It also has this last part of the game, part of the skill where it says, for every enemy troop hit by this skill, this commander's troop gains 50 range. So, if you hit 5 different targets with this active skill, you can gain up to 250 rage just right back. So he used 1000 rage to actually use his active skill, but he gains back 25% if he does, granted that you hit 5 different targets with this skill, 25% of the rage that you actually use so that you can cycle this skill faster. So that's why Sun Tzu is so good, because for one, his AoE damage is really, really strong that, in fact, actually, if you're talking about the active skill and the active skill alone that is available for you to use in KvK1, this skill might be one of the best AoE dealing skill in the game, arguably better than the YSG, which is a legendary commander, which is the best legendary commander that you can use in KvK1, because this skill right here only does 1700 damage factor that gets reduced by 15% every time you hit additional target. Because if you look at the skill right here, 1700 damage factor, it does get reduced all the way down to 40% of the 1700, which is what, 680 damage, which is a lot less than 1000 that Sun Tzu does. But YSG, Isangge, is considered the best commander that you can possibly have in KvK1 as legendary commander. So again, he has different parts of his kit that does make him better than Sun Tzu, but if you're just talking about the active skill, the active skill and active skill only, Sun Tzu has the greatest amount of damage potential that it can possibly do to 5 different targets in front of you. If you granted that you hit all 5 different targets with this skill. So Sun Tzu's active skill is really, really strong. And he has a 10% damage reduction skill on his third skill, and then he does gain 10% extra health. This garrison damage taken reduction is not really helpful, but if you're garrisoning with Sun Tzu, this is actually not bad at all. It's just 7% less damage that you can take with it, and then he does gain 20% extra skill damage with this. So this is further amplified with that skill damage amplification that he has on his fourth skill. So that's why Sun Tzu is an S tier. Sun Tzu is really, really strong, and arguably stronger than most legendary commanders that you can possibly find in KvK1. So if you have extra epic commander sculptures, and you don't really have enough DPS on the field, Sun Tzu is actually a great commander that you can consider using because, man, he does a lot of AoE damage. So that's why Sun Tzu is placed at the S tier. Kusunogi is right next to Sun Tzu for a simple reason. Kusunogi has 800 damage factor. Let's just go ahead and jump right back to the game. I'm not going to go too much into Kusunogi because Sun Tzu was it was necessary for me to talk about Sun Tzu a little bit more because Sun Tzu was just busted of a champion. But his active skill, AoE, does 300 damage factor to each target and to up to 3 different targets. But then again, each enemy troop hit by each these skills take extra 250 damage factor for 2 seconds. So this actually does 800 damage factor on top of his cleanse for his active skill. So Kusunogi has very, very strong commander. It is a shame that it only can hit up to 3 enemy troops in a fan, which is kind of a bummer. It's not as strong as Sun Tzu because Sun Tzu can hit 5 different targets with 1000 damage factor that is amplified further by 20%, 20% of the skill damage buff that he has, but he can only hit 3 different targets. So Kusunogi is like a little bit weaker than Sun Tzu, but then again, it is very hard for you to hit 5 different targets with a fan AoE. So it is what it is, right? But his extra damage actually doesn't end there. His extra damage actually comes from this skill right here too, where you have, whenever you're launching a basic attack, you have 10% chance to do 450 damage factor for every second for 2 seconds. So he also has 10% chance to deal 900 damage total whenever you're doing an auto basic attack with 10% chance. So this skill right here is the reason why he's an S tier. Not because he does massive amount of AoE. I mean, like, he does good AoE, don't get me wrong, but he does have extra 900 damage factor from his basic attack. That's why he deserves a spot in the S tier. Because if it was just for this, then this is worse, far worse than whatever Sun Tzu has. But then again, he has extra damage that he can do to 1 target. And then he has that extra attack and defense that you can get for archers. And then there is a garrison damage bonus, counter-attack damage bonus, which is not really relevant. So yeah, Kusunogi is a very good S tier commander that I'll recommend for you at the end of the day. Now let's just go ahead and move on. All right, so next commander that I do want to put at the S tier is actually Baibars. And I'll actually put Baibars right above Kusunogi. And the reason why is because Baibars actually, just like Sun Tzu, has 1000 damage factor AoE for 5 targets. And it also has the extra effect, which is to reduce the march speed of the targets that are hit. So it's not as DPS heavy as Sun Tzu because Sun Tzu allows you to recycle your active skill much faster with that extra rage gain that I talked about. But then again, Baibars still hits 5 targets with 1000 damage factor. So in terms of damage that it does with active skill is the same as Sun Tzu. But then again, he also does slow instead of getting more rage. So this is especially good, and this is very good for cavalry commander, especially because when you're chasing something down, that extra slow is going to help you out a tremendous amount. So that's why I would put Bybars at the S tier. And because it is a 1000 damage factor to 5 different targets, that's how I would put him above Kusunogi. Because Kusunogi's skill is 800 damage factor to 3 targets. This is 1000 damage factor to 5 targets with extra slow. So Kusunogi does have that cleanse that he doesn't have, but then again, it's just true just in terms of level of power level that I would say like Bybars does this tremendous amount. And then he has that 20% attack, which is nice. If the commander's troop launches a basic attack against the city, this is not really that helpful because there's rarely any chance that you're gonna hit a city with Bybars. But then again, it reduces the attack and defense of the city by 7% and 7%. And then he has, whenever this troop exits the combat, it gains 50% march speed for 10 seconds and recovers a portion of slightly wounded units by 200 damage factor. So this skill is actually one of the main reasons why I actually put Bybars at S tier, is because what this does is if you hit people with AoE and you slow them down and you just don't want to deal with that that fight anymore, then you will actually be able to activate this by just exiting the combat. And you'll gain 50% march speed for 10 seconds. What that means is that once you exit the combat, you can just run away from anything with Bybars at the end of the day. So very powerful skill. Again, it just harmonizes really well with his active skill, which does give you that extra march speed reduction for the enemy. So yeah, that's why I would put Bybars at S tier among all epic commanders. Now, is there any other epic commanders that I'll put at the S tier? It is tough to say. No, I would actually stop there. So those are the 3. And I think this makes sense, right? Because each troop type will have one epic commander that you can use for to pair up with your legendary commander among all the epic commanders, right? So those are the strongest epic commanders you should be considering investing in if you're thinking about fighting on the open field, where you would be able to do massive amount of AoE. And among those 3, I would say Sun Tzu actually deserves the double S tier, just because 1, he does massive amount of DPS because of that rage regain that he has, along with 1000 damage factor and along with skill damage buff that he has on the force skill. For 2, he has 10% damage reduction. That's just generally really good, although 10% infantry health is exclusive to infantry. Having the rest of its kit does not really matter depending on what kind of troop type that you're using him with, right? So I would say you can honestly use Sun Tzu as like even an archer commander if you want to just put YSG and then put Sun Tzu behind him. That's how powerful Sun Tzu is. So again, among the S tiers that I was talking about in this tier list, I think Sun Tzu deserves a very top list. This is one of the reasons why I put him at the very left side. But yeah, so the SS tier just without a question goes to Sun Tzu. Now let's talk about PvE only. And I want to put at the very top of that PvE only list, Joan of Arc Epic Commander. So the reason why Joan of Arc Epic is really good is simple. She has massive gathering speed and load bonus with her second skill. So very, very powerful gathering commander. I wouldn't say powerful, but very good gathering commander at the end of the day, because loading a gathering speed and load is all you need when you actually are looking for a gathering commander. And the fact that she has universal 25% gathering speed is crazy. But on top of that, she's actually usable for combat. if you actually want to use her for the combat. Let's just take a look at her first skill that is also an expertise skill. If you actually use her active skill, for the next 4 seconds, up to 5 nearby allied or friendly troops gain the following buff. Infantry gains 30% health, cavalry gains 30% defense, archers gain 30% attack. And then troops themselves gain extra 50 rage per second for next 4 seconds. So what this active skill does is it not only gives the nearby troops tremendous amount of buff, especially powerful for the earlier part of the game, but it also gives you extra rage per second for 4 seconds. So this gives you up to 5 nearby allies or allied or friendly troops 200 rage just by using this skill, including herself. So in net, as let's say you're using 5 different marches. In net, if you actually activate Joan of Arc Epic Commander's skill, you're practically gaining 1000 rage as a whole group. And you're not really losing rage by activating this skill at the end of the day, right? Practically speaking, right? So this buff is really, really good. If you have room for you to actually make one buff march, you can make Joan of Arc with Mulan, which is one of the legendary commanders. And Mulan's in leadership. Huh? Integration? Yeah, there we go. So Mulan, which also gives you extra attack, defense, health bonus. So if you have enough slots for you to be able to, if you have enough troops that you can actually bring out on the field, and if you want to maximize your output by buffing the heck out of them, you can have Mulan and Joan of Arc Epic Commander to basically buff the heck out of your commander. So again, she's a very good gathering commander, but she's also a very good buffer that you can use on the combat. And then what is really important for the buffer is also survivability, and her third skill actually gives you extra chance for you to heal the slightly wounded units with 450 damage factor with cooldown of 5 seconds. So this basically is like, oh well, you're the buffer, so you're gonna have to survive in the field as long as possible. So try to gain as much healing as possible from the field by whenever you're attacking an enemy troop. Is basically what this skill does. And the fourth skill also gives you normal damage buff, which means that if you're getting focused with this Joan of Arc commander, then you can actually try to deal more damage with that normal damage buff. So not the best skill that you can think of, but then again, not the worst skill that you can actually have. So yeah, Joan of Arc, for those reasons, I would put her at the PvE #1 slot. Again, really, really good gathering speed and possible usage on the field really puts her up at the another level above A tier commander in the day. And then right behind Joan of Arc, I'll put Lohar. And the reason why Lohar is really, really important is simple, because Lohar has two things. For one, the third skill will give you 70% extra EXP from defeating barbarians. Now, in the earlier part of the game, getting EXP from defeating barbarians become one of the major sources that you can actually get the experience from for early game players. And having 70% buff for that is really, really powerful, especially when you're doing something like killing the Holy Site Guardians. That will give you like 20,000 EXP per unit that you're actually killing. This 70% extra buff that you can get from him is going to be huge buff to those Holy Site killings. So again, this is a very, very strong PvE skill. And his fourth skill, this commander troop recovers a portion of its slightly wounded units whenever it exits combat. This allows Lohar to be used with another commander that you want to level up because you have the 70% EXP buff that you can actually utilize him with. What this allows you to do is you can just have like anyone who doesn't have any gear, anyone who doesn't have like almost anything right behind Lohar, and still kind of not die while you're doing bar fighting, because every time you exit the combat, you're getting 2000 damage factor healing. And the reason why that's crazy is if you actually go to another healing commander, let's say Richard for example. Richard's active skill is not 2000 damage factor healing. It's only 1400 damage factor healing. So to think that every time you kill a barb and exit the combat, you heal 2000 damage factor healing is crazy. And that's why Lohar's really good. Right? Pretty simple, right? Lohar just, yeah, it's just really, really good. Then I'll put the Boudica, the epic version. I keep saying like Chonabar Prime. I really do apologize because I've been saying Chonabar Prime for like last 3 years whenever I made content, and it just stuck to my mouth. But then again, Boudica, the regular Boudica, not Boudica Prime. Boudica is really good for barb fighting, because not only she does extra damage to the barbs, it also gives you 20% extra EXP from defeating barbs. So that itself is just simply one of the reasons why you're leveling up Boudica, because of that extra EXP on top of extra damage to barbs. But on top of that, she does have pretty decent damage. You know, it has 1000 damage factor skill with active skill, and then reduces the attack of the attacker. So if you're using Boudica to kind of, you know, swarm barb with your main marsh, you're gonna do decent amount of damage too. On top of that, you can gain more rage, and then has a slightly wounding healing thing also as well whenever you use an active skill. So again, that sustainability is really good. And then it has like a really good skill, but that's really for combat at the end of the day. But whenever it uses a basic attack, it has like 5% chance to deal 50% extra damage, 3% chance to do 100 damage bonus, 2% chance to do 150 damage factor for 2 seconds, for 1 second. This is actually not a bad support skill if she does appear in Heroic Anthem KvKs later, but then again, we're talking to, I'm assuming that I'm talking to a younger age governors who are in KvK 1 or 2, so you wouldn't know this, but this is actually a pretty decent skill as well. Her active skill just buffs her expertise skill actually just buffs the active skill, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so that's why I will put Boudica, the epic Boudica, at PvE, right behind Lohar at the end of the day. And let's see what else. Who else can actually make? Oh well, Margaret. Let's talk about Margaret. Matilda, sorry. Matilda is weird that she has gathering speed like Joan of Arc does. So yeah, Matilda has gathering speed buff like Joan of Arc does, but it's actually excluding gold. It's not universal. It's only applicable for stone, food, and wood, which is the worst version of Joan of Arc's universal 25% gathering speed, by the way. And it's only 25% for stone. So that's another bad part about this skill. She does, however, have the expertise skill that will give you 10% extra resources, which is really nice. But the rest of her kit really doesn't give you anything. Like, for example, this one, right? It gives siege units 30% health and 30% defense. Doesn't really mean anything because she's not an engineering commander, so you can't really use her for like an arrow tower in a later part of the game too. So like having 30% health and defense bonus doesn't really matter. Unit capacity does matter because that means that you can actually give more siege units to this commander pairing or whoever like whether or not you use Matilda as primary or secondary. So this is actually really helpful. But then again, yeah, so she has some downside as a gathering commander, but then again, she does have pluses, advantages over Joan of Arc because of that extra unit capacity and extra resources. Her active skill doesn't really matter because you're using, like, she only buffs siege units. So siege units at the earlier part of the game doesn't really matter at all. So yeah. So as just because she's only usable for gathering and gathering only, and I think Joan of Arc still is a better option there. I'll put her obviously below Joan of Arc. I think below Lohar and Boudica too. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good spot for Matilda at the end of the day. But yeah, she's a good commander. I would say invest at least on the second skill so that you can get the gathering speed. And if you have extra epic commander sculptures that you can actually put into PvE commanders, you can obviously get the extra 10% bonus of gathering once it's finished, which is really nice. And then that 15% unit capacity buff is really helpful, especially if you're gathering from alliance resource nodes, which will actually give you extra, which would actually, benefit if you have more troops in there. So yeah, she has her uses, and I think she's really good. Actually, I'll just bump her right above Boudica just because of, Boudica does have better alternative, which is Lohar. But I think you should be using both Boudica and Lohar because you should be pairing your most urgently EXP needed commander with Lohar, but then again, the second most urgently needed EXP commander with Boudica, and then use both of them. But then again, Matilda, in terms of gathering, anything that is not gold, she's really, really good. So yeah, that's how I would put it. All right, so moving on to A tier, I would say the very top of the A tier is actually a spot for Bjorn. Now, the reason why Bjorn is strong is simple, because Bjorn has a very strong active skill, which will give you 700 damage factor, and then also up to 3 enemy troops in a fan takes 15% extra skill damage. So if you put Bjorn right in front of Sun Tzu and then run the Bjorn Sun Tzu combo, you can do extra skill damage to Sun Tzu's extra skill damage she already does, like crazy skill damage she already does. So that's a very good pairing that you can actually run in KvK1 if you don't have a very good charge metal at the end of the day. His other skills are pretty simple. 15% attack bonus, and then another 10% attack bonus, 10% defense bonus. All really powerful, but his real power comes from his third skill to a fourth skill, which was whenever you launch the basic attack, you have 10% chance to deal extra 800 damage factor. So combined together, he does about 1500 damage factor. And on top of that, he does a debuff of 15% extra skill damage that the enemy takes. And this debuff, the skill damage taken debuff, can be applied to anything that's hitting you, right? So once you have this 15% extra skill damage debuff on that target, whether you're hitting this with your, let's say you have Bjorn Sun Tzu, right? It's not only going to benefit Bjorn Sun Tzu that you're actually using, but also, let's say you have Bjorn Sun Tzu Minamoto YSG. It's also going to make that Minamoto YSG deal extra 15% more skill damage to that target. So this unique debuff is really, really important. So that's why I will put Bjorn at the very top place for A tier. And if you can't believe me, you should actually try Bjorn Sun Tzu in Kenya in the earlier part of the game. And they do exceptionally well. They do really, really well. So yeah. Not really much more to say about it. His kit is just really harmonious, just like how Sun Tzu is. So that's why I'll put him at the very top of the A tier. Right after, yeah, right after Bjorn, I would say Osman is another good option that you can consider. Because simple, he does have very strong active skill damage factor. 1100 is really good for an epic commander. He does get 15% attack for 120 seconds after attacking a city, which is not really that amazing, but he has this third skill. 1 second after this commander's troop uses the active skill, it deals additional damage to his current target of 400 damage factor. But this is every time you use an active skill, right? So let's say you use Osman with Sun Tzu, for example, right? This will trigger the first time that it hits, whenever, let's say, whether Sun Tzu or Osman uses the active skill first, but then again, once the secondary commander uses an active skill, this will also trigger again. So this skill is really, really important because it does 800 damage factor per skill cycle at the end of the day. And then that extra unit capacity also helps. And yeah, just overall, very good leadership commander. It's a shame that he doesn't do AoE damage, but even as a single target damage nuker, he's actually not bad at all. Alright, so yeah, I'll put Osman right behind Bjorn. Belisarius. Ooh, Belisarius is probably a candidate for A tier, but I'm not sure where I'll put him. Well, let's just take a look at what he does before we talk about Belisarius' place in A tier and why I'll put him at the A tier. The reason why is simple. For one, it does a massive debuff to the target. His damage factor is a little bit low, but then again, he does have 30% attack and 30% defense. And then he does more damage to barbarians, which is nice. And then he has 30% defense, and this is why. The troop gains 50% march speed for 10 seconds whenever it accesses combat. Huh, where did we see that? Where did we see that? Oh, we saw it from buy bars, right? Yeah, so when you're using Belisarius on the field, you're using Belisarius for probably one purpose and one purpose only in the earlier part of the game, which is farm killing. So if you have Belisarius and buy bars running on the field, and you're just hopping different alliance nodes to just kill a lot of farms, that's a good way that you can actually just farm up a lot of kills in the earlier part of the KvKs. I wouldn't recommend that will be your main strategy for you gaining KPs, because most likely you're just getting T1 kills at the end of the day. But sometimes this is a very, very annoying combo because it gains that 50% extra march speed on top of 50% extra march speed after it exits combat. So whenever you kill those farm nodes, you can just run away and no one can actually catch you with Belisarius Prime and buy bars at the end of the day. So yeah, that's a very good combo. His 4 skill is really nice. Whenever this the troop deals 25% extra damage to troops with less than 50% remaining. So this will allow you to kind of kill that farm faster and then run away after activating his third skill. The 4th skill just buffs the buffs the 2nd skill, I think. But now I think about it, I don't think he really deserves to be in an A tier. If you compare him to, let's say, Bjorn or Osman, yeah, I think he does deserve to be bumped down to B tier. But he does have really good news. Like, if you're in the earlier part of the game, you don't have any kills, but like, you want to bother the enemy, or if you want to just farm kill, whatever, Belisarius Prime does have actual purpose and uses in the game. So that's what I mean. But in terms of power level, it's obviously not an A tier power. So I'll bump it down to B. I was originally going to put him in A. Let's see. Herman. No, Belisarius. Pelagius? I forgot how to say his name. Yeah, Pelagius. Pelagius is another interesting commander. He has march speed, Oh no, he doesn't have March speed. Okay, so he does the 300 damage factor and gains 100 rage, and then the target takes additional 300 damage factor for the next 2 seconds. So he has 900 damage factor and gains back 100 rage, which is not bad. Single target damage. It's not great, but it's not bad. He does gain 15% attack and defense. He heals himself a little bit, and the expertise just bumps up this skill right here. Overall, not really a great commander. I would say probably either a B tier or a C tier. I'll put him at the bottom of the B tier and then think about bumping him down. All right, let's move on. Scipio Africanus, the epic version, not the Scipio Prime. He's actually interesting commander. His concept is you take less damage with active skill and then do more counterattack by 25% for the next 5 seconds. And then his expertise skill and the second skill gains 15% chance to gain 100% attack for 2 seconds whenever you're hit by a basic attack. If the troops units remaining are reduced to less than 50%, it has 15% chance to recover units by 500 damage factor for 15%. 15% chance. So interesting concept. So whenever he is hit by many different targets, you gain more attack, and you're low, you heal yourself as well. And then 7% more damage when attacking a CD, whatever. And then he has 10% unit capacity. The expertise is basically the same as the second skill. So his concept basically is simple: hedgehog. You're gonna try to do as much normal damage, counterattack damage as possible against the enemies while you're taking less damage. He is usable when paired with Charles Martel, who also does a lot of massive. Let's just go ahead and find Charles Martel. Yeah, Charles Martel, who has a shield, by the way. 1200 damage factor. He gains extra bonus damage. And he does 30% extra counterattack damage once you expertise Charles Martel. So if you use him with Charles Martel, you can kind of hedgehog and then like, oh, if you attack me, you're gonna take more damage kind of deal was the concept. But in reality, that doesn't really work. People are just gonna ignore you. If they see Charles Martel on the field, you're really not. People are not gonna really attack you. So I'll put him. I think he's still better than Pelagus because he actually has a purpose. But yeah, not the greatest commander to kind of use at the end of the day. All right, let's talk about Ulji Mundao. That is a Korean commander. And he's a very interesting commander of his own too. So he's a garrison commander that can be paired up most likely with Sun Tzu. But so his active skill does 750 damage factor, which is not a lot, but then again he has 30% defense reduction for 2 seconds. So this actually allows your secondary commander's active skill to do extra damage to whatever targets that you're hitting. And then on top of that, he does have 5% defense bonus whenever you're city garrison, which is not a lot. Expertise give you 15% attack and defense. And then this is actually the important part. So whenever this troop is hit with a basic attack, it has 10% chance to gain 100% damage bonus though for 1 second. So if you get really lucky with this skill, you can actually do massive damage with your active skill because you get 100% damage bonus from this. But yeah, if you're in the earlier part of the game, you really wanted to use a garrison commander, he's something that you can consider, but I will say that he's not really the greatest. I would say he's probably around where Pelagius is. A little bit above because he actually has a purpose again. But yeah, not the greatest commander to invest in at the end of the day, in my opinion. But if you don't have Charles Martel, you can obviously consider him using him at the end of the day. Now, Herman Herman is a very interesting commander because, for one, he does 1150 damage factor and reduces the range of the target by 100 and silences the target for 2 seconds. So what he does is simple. If you get first turn, if you get range advantage against whatever enemy that you're hitting against, you will have tremendous amount of skill cycle advantage against whatever targets that you're hitting. But it's a shame that this is actually a single target damage. If this was AoE, that would be kind of busted. But then again, yeah, it does silence, it reduces the range. It basically is like, okay, well, you're not gonna use active skill for the next 3 seconds at the end of the day. Is what this skill does. Archer attack, March speed. March speed is nice though. Earlier part of the game, you don't really get that many places that you can get Archer March speed. So having 10% March speed is nice. Garrison attack is whatever. This is not really important. Normal damage buff is okay, but not the best. And then 10% chance to gain extra rage is good. Overall, you will basically, if you use Herman, you'll do massive damage, but then again, that's not the main part. The main part is that you'll have, in the long run, if you're hitting your targets for a long time, you're just getting a massive rage buff against your enemy. I don't think he deserves his place as an A tier, but I'll say that he deserves his place as the very top place for B tier because I think he's a very useful commander at the end of the day. So yeah, that is how I will put them. I'm not going to evaluate Kira because she's a very special commander. And let's just think about what commanders deserve their place as C tier. I think Uchi and Pelagius both deserves their place as C tier. Yeah, Uchi, like, who's really gonna use Uchi as a garrison commander? You can honestly just use Sun Tzu and Charles Martel. Right? If you don't really want to use Charles Martel, let's say you don't have Charles Martel just because you don't have that many, you haven't been really lucky with your gold keys and whatnot, you can just use Sun Tzu with anything else that is above A tier. You can use Bjorn for God's sake, just do a lot of massive damage. And that would just be better than Uchi, right? So Uchi doesn't really have a place. Heck, you can use Osman and do massive skill damage as well. Like, Uchi doesn't have any benefits for itself to be like put above all these other commanders. So yeah, Uchi does deserve a C tier. I think Pelagius does deserve to be a C tier. Just because his like whatever he does is okay, but then again, not like he would be out damaged by Osman regardless, for example. Then he does like little weird debuffs that's not really helpful. So yeah, I would say just having Pelagius is here is okay. I don't know about Belisarius. I think that's a very tough call. I think Belisarius does deserve his place at the C tier though. No, you know what? I'll just put him at the very last place for B tier. Again, if you use Belisarius with buy bars, you gain massive march speed. It does, a lot of people does use that pairing for farm killing. But like all these other commanders that are in the B or below, no one really uses them. So I would say for that purpose and that purpose alone, I'll just keep him at the B tier. His skill set is really garbage. But the fact that you still use and see Bars Belisarius combo, at least for one thing, which is farm killing. Yeah, I would just still keep him at the B tier. Alright, so that's pretty much it. I hope you guys actually enjoyed it. I try to be as descriptive as possible on all the commanders that I reviewed today. So I hope you guys actually enjoyed this. If you guys did enjoy this video, please go ahead and drop a thumbs up. And please subscribe to my channel because it would help me out a ton. And if you have any questions about anything that I talked about in this video, please feel free to leave it down in the comment down below or ask me on Discord as well. All right, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And as always, I'll see you all in the next video. All right, peace.